Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and we are back for another From the Ashes, where we talk about all things Ashes of Creation. With me this week, my co-GM, Stormzlord. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Looking forward to this conversation.
Hopefully our conversation is better than the test conversations where the audio was off, but we'll see.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, let's really hope so. Whew. Also joining us, the one, the only Alpha Soul himself. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to have you once again. And for the show we have planned, it felt like it would have just been a massive disservice if I had not invited Sinbad. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me back on.
Oh, anytime. So, little summary for tonight's show, and the reason why it would have been such a massive disservice is we are going to be talking about the latest live stream by Intrepid Studios, talking a little bit about the Alpha Zero footage, just a touch. And then we're going to kind of move on to some of the Q&A questions, specifically about the Mariner skill, not seamanship, the Mariner skill. So there you go, Intrepid. You can have that one. So yeah, obviously, Sinbad not being on a show about boats would have just been wrong in so many levels. So,
oh yeah.
So that is what we got planned for you guys tonight. But before we do, of course, I have to give a shout out to our new patron supporters over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. That is Robert Wallace and Scribble_MMO. Scribble, on the other hand, is pretty cool because he actually hosts a website called Pantheon Radio where he does a little bit about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can check out his website, pantheonradio.com. Now, I did this the other night, and I'm going to blame him a little bit because he pretty much gave me an entire night of reliving my teenage years because I logged on the website to kind of take a look about it when he joined our Patreon program because, you know, I've known Scribble for a while, and he had mentioned about doing some stuff for this Pantheon Radio. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to check that out. And they had a DJ on, and they were playing some music. And it's very nostalgic because it was a whole bunch of Nightwish that came on. And I don't know if you know who Nightwish is, but they're a symphonic metal band from, like, Finland. And it's amazing. And I remember listening to it pretty much nonstop when I was, you know, a teenager 20-some years ago. So, yeah, that's to blame for that because I remember sending him a message going, a song came on the radio. I don't know what it is, but I used to love it. Please tell me you have a list. And he goes, well, yeah, let me contact the DJ. And he gave me a whole song listing. I'm like, I don't even know when it was. It was between here and here. And he gave me a whole drop down of the music they had played. So I finally got to find that again. So that was pretty cool. And, of course, I don't have it up right now, which is a shame. But we actually did have a couple iTunes reviews. I'm going to try to pull that up very quickly. I had it up before, but unfortunately I had to reboot my PC because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we were having a little bit of audio drama issues, and it sucked. Yeah. But we had 2 new 5-star reviews from Eternal Pantheon saying an absolutely wonderful show, and a 5-star review from Def Jam Raza. Like the title says, this is a great series of podcasts by the Dungeon Crawler Network covering Ashes of Creation. They bring great topics, information, and varying points of view to discussion table, which I love to hear. Consistent quality and perspectives, even when critiquing or touching on not in-game level news, because they provide ideas, suggestions, or solutions to what possibly is going on from both the real world and gamer experiences. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you so much for that review. Of course, that does help us out. It allows people to know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. All right, I've pretty much been going on for nonstop for like 5 minutes now, so let's go ahead and jump right on into the show. June 9th, they had a live stream, guys. Let's go around the table here a little bit. Was the live stream any good. I guess is the best way to say it. Storms, what about you? Do you see anything that you really liked?
Oh, absolutely. I was astounded at some of the things I saw. I did very much like what I saw.
Very cool. How about you, Alpha Soul?
Overall, I'm pretty happy with what I saw, or heard as well too.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that right now.
Okay, and definitely, I'm sure a lot of people in our community have been also thankful of this. But Alpha Soul was amazing and was giving a live transcript in our Discord while we were listening to the show, so that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Alpha, because I was at work, so I was only kind of half listening while I was doing it. So if I missed something, it was nice to be able to look over in Discord. Oh, Alpha already typed it out for us. That's great.
No problem. That was a lot of fun to do, actually. Kept me a little bit more involved.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I can definitely tell you sometimes when you're listening to these live streams, if you're not actively recording something, it's easy to kind of zone out and then go, oh, I think I missed something and have to go back. Sinbad, what about you, sir?
Actually, I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see combat because it was kind of teased. But I loved it. I mean, sure, we had a lot of questions that are kind of already got answered in other streams. But we got to see some footage of new architecture, which I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And then we also got the ships, a lot of ship details, which I'm all about.
As you can probably see from the title of this episode of High Seas, that's pretty much the main focus. For myself, I mean, well, first off, he did say combat's coming the next live stream in 2 weeks. I kind of bear an unpopular opinion. I think the combat's fine as it is. I like tab target. I think action combat actually is probably one of the worst things that ever came to MMOs because it tends to just be a spam fest of, and I've yet to see an MMO, especially when you're talking about the rating aspects or like competitive PvE rating. I will grant you in PvP, the action combat is preferable, but in PvE combat, not so much. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel as tactical. It doesn't feel as interesting overall in my eyes. So I know it's unpopular for some, but I really don't care. If you don't like it, well...
Tell us what you really feel.
Well, no, I don't care. I don't mind being the negative one here. I mean, I do it enough with the elves, right? So we'll just add more to it.
Left.
It depends on how they do it. I mean, if they do it like Guild Wars 2 did it, yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Let's talk about it. This wasn't really planned, but I'm going to talk about this a little bit anyway because you brought this up. When this was first announced, I will say that Guild Wars 2 is the very first thing that came into mind. It really does feel like Guild Wars 2 from the videos and stuff we've seen, with the exception of the Q or whatever to auto attack. In Guild Wars 2, it was 1. That's where your auto attack was done, right? And it would combo. Now it was kind of everything I see about this game almost feels like Guild Wars 2 advanced. Even the quote unquote node system and the node events are Guild Wars 2. What did they call their random events?
Was it public? I forgot what the heck they were called.
They had some term for it. I know it's not the Renown Hearts. That's different. But the actual events that pop up had a specific... Dynamic events, yeah. It's literally Guild Wars 2 dynamic events, just maybe spaced out a little long. Honestly, I'm really thinking this is Guild Wars 2 2.0. That's what I'm seeing Ashes of Creation like. Maybe I'm wrong, but that was the first thing that hopped into my head. I will say, in Guild Wars 2, the combat is fun. The PvP combat is very fun in Guild Wars 2, especially when you do their battlegrounds are called, structured battlegrounds, or structured PvP, I guess that's what they call it. I've done the raids, and to be 100% frank, the whole super action-y thing, it works better than some other action games, but it still feels clunky, and I don't know why. It just feels spammy and clunky. Maybe it's the fact that there's no cooldowns, so you don't have to think about when you want to use certain abilities. You just kind of, hey, there it is, hit the key and go. Am I alone in this?
I mean, To an extent, I love the old school MMOs just because you can time everything out. It does require a lot of skill for your rotations to memorize that. And there's definitely a lot of players out there that don't know how to do that, don't know how to do multiple rotations, at least not well. But with the advent of macros, that kind of takes away that skill set.
It does to a certain extent, and that does...
Yeah.
It also goes into the fact of how they allow you to do macros, too, because some
True.
games will allow you to macro certain things. I know WoW kind of was a mix where you were able to do a lot of mouse over macros and things of that nature. I know one game that was awful with macros was Rift, where you could literally do your entire rotation in one button for the most part, and it would jump from one to the other. It was pretty much exactly, you could do it all from one button if you wanted to, and that was too far, obviously. So yeah, you're right. And it depends if they let you do macros at all. The fact they're still kind of on the fence about add-ons in general, I pretty much think they were like, we're not going to do them. So they very well might not allow you to do macros either. Yeah. So that may or may not really be a problem. But now I get where you're at. And Guild Wars 2 of the action games, even though some people don't consider Guild Wars 2 an action combat, I always did. I felt that was the more ideal type combat, but even that did feel spammy to me. And I really do think it's the lack of cooldowns, because one of the things about PvE rating, and even PvP to an extent, was when you pop those cooldowns. I mean, you see it now in the most popular esport in the world, like League of Legends and stuff. Well, I guess that's Fortnite now, but when someone popped their ultimate, that was something you timed, and when it was a good time, that was exciting to watch. Right. When you could just spam it whenever, it loses a little bit of that magic.
I think that they seem to be going for a good balance with the tab target / action combat portion of it. Like, if you have to at least aim your attacks, so you can't just turn around like you can in WoW and just spam as you're running away, as you can with like a mage ability, for example, or I'm sorry, a ranger or hunter abilities. But if you can aim it and then have cooldowns on top of that this still kind of keeps both of those aspects in there.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, the fact that they have tab target to begin with makes me think that, yes, you'll be able to do both, and that will be fascinating to see. I still believe, with all that's in my being, the people who are all about like Black Desert and the super spammy, you're not going to get that. I really don't think you're going to get that at all. So honestly, take that for what you will. Anyone else have any comments on the combat that was kind of unintended before we kind of move on to the next section?
Not yet. I want to see what actually comes out. I'm a little
same.
hesitant on how it's going to work until it comes closer.
Sure. Yeah, and for me, it's just, like you said, the theory. And when they said tab target and action, the first thing that went to my mind was Guild Wars 2, because they were the first to kind of do that. Even their aiming abilities were a soft lock, and, that's kind of how that worked. Anyway, thing we were going to talk about first is they did release a new Alpha 1 environment video, which, again, everyone knows here I'm a super fan of Ashes of Creation. I mean, we've been doing a show now for 53 weekly episodes over a year. Obviously, I'm a super fan. I wasn't overly impressed, and mostly it's for the fact that for what the video showed, we've seen the zone before. They just kind of put a bunch of the buildings they've been working on into the zone, because we've seen it at PAX. We've seen half a dozen of their Alpha Zero playthroughs, and we can even point out certain areas where they've been in the past, and now there's just a building there as well. So it's nice to see some of the building art, which I will say, as much as people know I hate the art direction that they're going for the armor and weapons, the art direction they have for the buildings is fantastic. So
I agree.
That is grade A, and I absolutely love the architecture, just not the character as of right now. Now, they also messed around with some lighting. I'm going to say this, and I don't know how this is really going to fit in, but remember when ESO did their big lighting patch, which was gorgeous from a PvE side of things, but totally destroyed Cyrodiil PvP. Like, they still to this day won't admit that's... Like, we can pinpoint when Cyrodiil PvP, the lag problem, was... and then all of a sudden it shot up massively with this patch. And I know they were like, oh, it was because of this, or this. I don't know if they ever removed it, or if the lighting had any type of effect. You really wouldn't think it would, but in ESO, when that patch came out, Cyrodiil lag and performance became a massive issue.
And the lighting has a lot of effect.
Really?
A lot of effect on the client side.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Even just particles like in the air, like the little dust particles, stuff like that, affects it.
It depends if it takes on that, it just quadruples, exponentially goes up if you take some particles too.
Right. Because I know that was always something in my head was like, really, it being client side, I didn't think it would cause as much issue, but...
Yeah, it's something that, you know, like typically with most games, you want a really high FPS, you turn down everything.
Oh, yeah.
You want a very, very ugly game.
Those God rays, they're
maximum.
gone. Yeah, no, we're done with that. No, I can see see that. I know what I provided was at best anecdotal evidence. I pronounced that wrong and I cannot say it right now. But because there's really should be no correlation in my head, but that's when in ESO we had some issues. I'm curious with the lighting changes if we're going to see any performance issues in the Alpha 0, Alpha 1 clients. Especially with some older hardware.
Well,
they said
take that into account.
They said all this is rendered with a 970. So
and it could be. It depends how long it's going to take to render it, right? But
I mean, rendered with a 970. I'm sure they recorded with a 970. I don't mean the video render itself.
But you render it, and that's in the server side. But you're still going to have to display it on the client side. So it's definitely going to have an effect.
Well, from a server side, I'm assuming they would be using like NVIDIA Grid or something like that. They wouldn't be using a 970.
Right, but they're probably gonna pre-bake it. They're not gonna do it real time. Right, so they're gonna want to pre-bake it, and then the client has to adjust it as it gets it as well. So it's gonna be a balance how they go through it.
Okay. Alpha Soul, what about you? What are some of your thoughts? I know you've been kind of quiet in general.
So it didn't really do much for me. It was actually very beautiful, but I already know the game looks good. I'm already hyped for the screens that I've seen and things around that. So this was just more of the same to me, and I was kind of feeling the same thing that Sinbad was. I was looking forward to combat or something of that line that we haven't actually seen yet. So
a little more tangible than.
Exactly. So it's not bad, but it's just, it was just like, meh, I was more interested in the talk from it rather than the actual video.
Right. And it's actually really funny because I was looking at, I'm going to give a news website. I'm not going to, a gaming news website. I'm not going to say what it was. But I was reading through a gaming news website and they had posted about from the ad, or not from the ad. I would probably name them if they posted from us, but no. They posted the video from the screenshot, and one of the commenters on the video, I've seen the commenter before. I feel like he's very trolly because he's kind of there for Star Citizen and every other indie game. He just kind of talks down on. But he did actually, despite the trolly nature of the comment, I felt it was pretty accurate. Where he's like, Intrepid Studios releases another environmental video. I have a feeling they think that their world is beautiful. And that was kind of the trolly nature of it. And I'm like, I guess I get that, but after so many of them, especially from our perspective, the fact that we've seen the Alpha Zero before just with new buildings, I definitely felt like, okay, let's get to some meat. I don't know.
Right,
yeah,
which
yeah.
For them at this stage right now is very difficult because everything's still being made, right? Like,
sure.
I kind of take this as like a piecemeal offering, as like something to kind of bide our time until next month, because they know what we want. Like we've been like shouting from the rafters, like saying, "Hey,
3.
Nodes 3, send us nodes. You know, like I want combat.
Hey,
Like,
I just want to note
Yeah.
that we were the first one to use send nodes because that was the very first episode. We did a companion episode on our dungeon crawlers, and its episode title was Send Nodes from May 3rd. So, just saying, you can go back in time. We had to send nodes. I even had the little troll face on the video going. All right, anyway. No, I agree. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into the main thing we really wanted to talk about. In the Q&A section, they talked a little bit about a mariner skill. Okay, so first off, let's do the first question, which would spawned all of this, and that's literally the only one we're really going to talk about. But the question that was asked was, will boats be summoned from anywhere on land, near water, or only in harbors? And Steven says, boats can only be summoned from the land. Boats, the purpose of that is, again, that if you win a battle at sea, it should be decisive and give you time to accomplish whatever you're attempting to accomplish before you can have retribution from opponents you've defeated. Will there be harbors boats can go inside of? Absolutely. Will there be, or those will be present along the coast. Those can pop up based on a node being developed nearby. If it's on a coast, or a node itself can have a harbor if the node itself is on a coast. There will likely be quests granted from the harbor specifically in regards to the sea and sea content. What you can do in the harbor will be a lot of different things, including upgrades to the boat. All right, so first off, let's talk about this a little bit. And it's the idea of harbors. The thing I thought of, and I haven't seen a modern game do this, but I'm going all the way back to Ultima Online. Alpha Soul, I'm sure you can relate to this one. Do you remember when you would walk outside along the coast and there were just boats lined up everywhere? Because the boats never despawned. Yep. Unless you pick them up and put them in your bag. Your boat, for all intents and purposes, when it was in the water, would remain in the world when you logged off.
Yeah, they were second houses, basically. Like, they're the poor man's version of a house.
Yeah, you had a houseboat.
You couldn't really afford it. Yeah.
Oh, I had a houseboat for like 3 years because I couldn't find a plot. So everything I owned was on a boat anchored in the Bay of U, I think it was, somewhere along there. That's where my boat was for like 3 years. I've not seen a modern game. Very few modern games even do boats, but when they do, did Ultima Online actually have like a log off time for them, or did they stay in the world forever, essentially? I feel like it was forever, but in my head, I could only think of the quote-unquote cluster. You know, like people log on, leave their boat, and then they just don't stop logging in. Yeah. Their boat's now stuck on the shore forever. I wonder if developers eventually were like, all right, this boat has been logged on for like 22 days, and the account that owns the boat hasn't been logged on, so let's despawn the boat. Let me tell you guys a story, because that's one of the favorite things that I like to do. When I first got into MMOs, I had met a guy from there was a shooter game called Operation Flashpoint. Okay, so this was going back a little bit. I was part of a little team squad that played multiplayer matches. I've never heard of MMOs before. And he was telling me about Ultima Online, but he lived in Hawaii. So I actually thought he was telling me a story about real life, to be honest. Because he's saying, I'm hanging out on this island, I'm fishing, just doing my thing. My head, he's talking about Hawaii, but he's not. This is what got me really into MMOs, that I was so enthralled by this story, thinking it was real life, until a little later. He's like, yeah, so I'm walking along the beach, and I see a boat. And this is normally not something that I would do. It's so against my character, but the boat was unlocked, so I took it. And in my head, I'm sitting there going, should I call the cops? Did this guy just steal someone's boat? So he's telling me, so I'm in the boat, just kind of searching around, hopping to island, and my 16-year-old mind, I was younger than that, I think it was like 14. My 14-year-old mind just could not comprehend what was going on. I'm like, okay, so you're just like a hobo going from island to island. I get you. Thought the islands were a little farther apart in Hawaii than that, but whatever, okay. And he's like, but see, sometimes this happens where the boats disappear, and this is where I was lost. And he goes, yeah. So all of a sudden the GM just ported these guys to me, and I'm sitting, are you talking about a game now? And that's when it kind of got for me that he was talking about a game. But I knew boats tended to disappear because they would, if you lost your boat, you could actually talk to a GM in the game and be like, I lost my boat. I don't know where it's at. The boat bugged and disappeared, and they would port you to your boat. So he was just telling me the story, like he looted the cargo hold, but then when they were ported onto the boat, he felt awful about it. He's like, so he gave him all this stuff back. But so boats would disappear now, but I almost feel like they were permanent. But I can't think of an engine being able to render these things unless they treated them as other characters, I guess.
You could, from what I remember, I was trying to look up some info while you were talking. From what I remember, I think you could repack them up into your pack.
Yeah, you could do that from a shore, but you didn't have to.
Right.
And I'm just curious about the guy who, okay, so he pulls up to land, lays his drawbridge so he can get on the land, walks off and do some adventuring. He logs off for the night, and for whatever reason, he dies. I know I went dark there. Or just never logged back on. Would his boat still be there? I know it would be there for at least a day. Because there were times where I parked my boat, I'd go out and do something, and I logged on almost every day, so I never really experienced too long of a thing. But
there may have been a decay.
A decay? Okay.
Yeah, kind of like with houses. Like if somebody didn't actually enter their house for I forgot what the time limit was, but it would just despawn after a while. You could see the decay, and yeah.
That sounds about right. Now that you mentioned decay, because I remember looking, especially when looking for a house. Do you remember going to different plots and checking the decay level, and then if you saw something, you hurriedly marked it like on a piece of paper? Okay, it was right outside of you. I walked 30 seconds down the path, took a right, and the house. Yeah, I was checking houses for decay constantly, and to try to find that plot. So yeah, no, that decay makes sense. But it's odd for games to actually render boats and mounts as, because like even other games, ESO for instance, renders a mount per se, but the mount isn't really its own thing from what I understand from a coding perspective. It's just a visual effect on your character, and it's rendered under you. Games like Arcade, for instance, are BDO, because those are the two that stick to my head. The mounts were like you could get off your horse on BDO, and your horse would stay there, or follow you, depending on if you had it on follow. But you could come back and your horse was still standing there, which was kind of neat. They actually render it as an in-game object. Now, that did kind of create a little bit of a cluster issue. So that's kind of my concern. Like, do you guys think they're going to allow these boats, like from the harbor perspective, what makes a harbor is the fact when you get there, there's boats in the harbor. Are they actually going to let them stay around?
Well, I think they're also going to make it a safe zone for the boats in the harbor. Which begs the question is, what else is the safe zone for the harbor? Is it only against other factions, other PvP? Or is it be some sort of weather effect on the boats? Because if you can destroy a boat in battle...
Why would you assume the harbor was a safe zone? Other than...
My assumption is based on a harbor. That's what a harbor is. A harbor is a safe zone in real life, right? There's an assumption.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of a assumption that within a node...
come off a node?
Yeah. Harbors... They even said on here that a harbor, like an actual stone harbor, if you will, would only spawn if the node itself happened to be by the water. Then it could arguably build... You know, like Sunhold in Somerset on ESO. It has a harbor because it's built right on the water.
Right.
Alinor is not, and it has no harbor. Unless you go away.
My assumption was those harbor, the stone harbor, and a node would be a safe zone. When you're talking a natural harbor in somewhere along the coast, to me, those wouldn't be.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I'm making assumptions. I don't know yet.
Well, you can destroy boats because he talks about it in a fighting area. But from a node side of things, like I think this goes kind of into nodes a little bit of whether or not a node itself, I think we talked about nodes kind of being I don't want to say a safe zone, but like protected space in Eve. High sec in Eve. Yeah, you could be killed, I guess. It's just highly unlikely because of all the NPC guards that will blow you out of the sky.
Yeah, you can. Because they did, even in that same stream, they did talk about corruption for a brief moment, and emphasizing the fact that there is no safe place. Basically, you can get corruption anywhere. You can kill anyone, anywhere. Basically,
right. It's kind of like the notion of in ESO, if you found a person walking out in the woods that was attackable, yeah, you could probably kill him and not really probably get caught. You could do the same thing in the city, but those invulnerable guards that are walking around all the time, it's much more dangerous to do it in a crowded town than it is out. There's one random NPC in a hut that's farming. Yeah, you could probably kill them pretty easily and not really face the wrath of the guards. I specifically know that there's a farm outside Mournhold in ESO where there's NPC slaves that you can kill. They could spot you, other slaves could spot you, and then you could get a bounty on you, but there's no guards around, so unless you enter a city, no one's gonna... Doesn't matter. They're like, I'm gonna call the guards. It's like, well, good on you, but they're all the way over there, so they're lazy. They're not leaving the city, so you're not gonna do anything.
I'm fairly certain they said the only safe zones in the entire game are the initial starting cities.
You're right.
Yeah, and we don't even know if they're starting cities. They just said the starting zone, whatever that would happen to be. Whether it's a city or, where people first spawn in, probably the zone where the Divine Gateway is. Because I'm going to take a leap here and assume that every new character pops at one of these Divine Gateways. Sort of like how every human started at the what was the name of the monastery in Elwyn Forest? I can't remember. In WoW. Or, like every human is right outside the gates of this little monastery. That's where you start. Everyone starts there. Yeah. Okay. So, harbors aside, they kind of talked about the seamanship progression? We're going to call it the mariner progression. The mariner skills. So he kind of goes back and forth a little bit about this idea of the mariner. I'm going to try to read what Steven said. It's kind of a little all over the place because it was a conversation. What all you are talking about, I'm talking about, it can't be baking confirmed. Okay, I get it because he said it. One of the ideas we're putting into our C content designs, ships will have piloting skills, different classes among the ships. Additionally, they'll have utility and weaponry that can be implemented onto the ship. We were talking about mariners before the stream cut off. I felt like we were back in the early days of Kickstarter. We've never really gone down like that. Oh, from the this is when the thing died. That's why it's all over the place. I see everybody as being mature about the internet selves and the seamanship stuff. Hence Mariner. All right. So boat skills. Part of AOC is that there are many different progression paths. You can have your adventuring class, society progression, node progression, crafting progression, weapon progression, mariner progression. I'm going to put that in there. Among the different classes of boats you'll have in Ashes of Creation. There are also different components that will exist on the hull of the ship. These components can be weapons, defensive, utility, trading, piloting. Part of the Mariner class is that you can gain experience in handling these different components. You'll become more adept at using them, which will make you more sophisticated Mariner. And that's actually, he typed Mariner on the sea. He finally called on to Mariner. All right. Let's talk about this. And I'm actually going to let our guest Sinbad because he seems all excited all of a sudden. So I'm sure he has a few ideas in his head. Go ahead.
All right.
I'm just going to let you loose.
First of all, I love the fact that this actually has its own progression. That on its own is amazing to me. I was worried that it was just going to be another vehicle you could drive around,
Well, I'm going to interject this one here, too, because you said its own progression. From the wording that I was reading, it's its own progression for each class of vessel. So a sloop is going to be different than a battleship from a skimmer. So you can have different progressions depending on, and I guess it would make sense if you could, you know, if you were a master at a sloop doesn't necessarily mean you understand how a full naval carrier is going to operate, because it's clearly a different class all in of itself.
Yeah. I wonder though if the individual components would translate to whatever ship you're on.
Oh yeah.
You know, because that would make sense. I mean, if you're good at sailing, like navigating, you should be good at navigating any ship necessarily. It's just depending on where you're going.
Depends on the skill.
Yeah.
Right. So you have like different weapons on different types of ships. Those I think would be different skills. But you sailing, I would think, if you're going to be in maybe a single sail ships, those should sail the same. But if you're talking a double or a triple sail ship, they're going to sail different.
I really wish I would have thought about it. I actually have up in my library, somebody actually had, and they plastered it to a piece of wood. They lacquered it to this wood. It was an old, from like 1850, an old, was given to sailors. It was like a how-to guide for how to rig this specific ship. Yeah. And there were like 30 different component sails to this ship. So all of a sudden you see this ship diagram with all these sails and these numbers, and it had a corresponding list down below. I wish I had it, because I'd probably post it back here. It's up in the library, and if I would have thought about it, I would have brought it down, because I think it would have just been fitting. But it was neat to see, like, you were right. A smaller ship may have 2 sails, you know, whereas this ship that was from, like, I think the late Civil War or whatever had something like 30 different sail components. Like, there were tons on this, and that's what this was. This was essentially a cheat sheet for the sailors going on the boat, so they could kind of figure out where they were going. Because it's not like just hoist the main sail. It's like, which one? Main sail 1, 5, 7, 12, or 21? Like, there were a lot of different parts. But I know what, going back to what you said earlier about if you're good at navigating, do you think that would be more of a life skill? Like, let me kind of put a visual in everyone's head. Almost everyone here played ESO, okay? So you know how the weapon skills had, like, or even the guild skills, for instance. So Fighter's Guild is perfect. It had its own line. You could see it, and it would level up, right? But then there's a different skill under each one. And now in this one, it was a specific skill. But what if you just had Mariner as a skill, and it would level up? But then underneath it was sloop, battleship. Then you could see your different progression, because just because I was ranked 10 in the Fighter's Guild didn't mean I actually purchased any of the skills to use. And when I did, I'd have to level them up to use them. In my head, that's the visual I have of one master skill. And then the skills underneath, you could then learn in or in conjunction. So it would have navigating, but then it would be like sloop, whatever, steering or whatever it was. You could break it down even further. So you could have an overarching skill for the more common related things that are the same per ship, but then break it down for the different classes of ships available.
Yeah. Now, one thing with that they didn't really mention, but I'm wondering if it's the same as it is with the crafting professions. If you can only master certain things, you can't master everything. So it kind of forces you to have to either be a jack of all trades and kind of be okay at it, or if you do want to master, you have to do it with other people. You have to have a crew in that sense.
Stormzlord, let's get your take on this. The idea of, say there were different positions on a ship, you know, gunner, whatever. I don't know what positions on a ship there'd be, but I mean, obviously you'd have someone who mans the weapons, someone who mans the sails, someone who mans the oars if it's an oared ship, and you could only learn one of those. Thoughts?
Well, not like, you can maybe learn more than one, but you can't do more than one at the same time, right? So depending how they're going to play the ship, you're going to have several people to run a ship, if not like a dozen, right? So
is that confirmed that we're going to need
there.
Multiple people to run bigger ships?
No, I'm assuming again, because I like to do that.
Well, no, we can make that assumption. I was just curious if there was something, but I know from from what little I played of Arc Age, when you had a rowboat, you were fine. People could ride your rowboat, but the bigger ships they always show with multiple people. But from my understanding, you could still summon your boat by yourself. You didn't need other people. It just kind of made it easier, I guess.
The assumption is just based on the way they're talking about the components that you have to do. Again, I just made the assumption that the components can't be done at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't be in two places at once.
Like, take for instance, Sea of Thieves, right? You couldn't be steering and drop the anchor at the same time.
Right.
You had to leave the wheel to drop the anchor, unless you had somebody else on the boat with you. So, to me, I'm just making the assumption that based on the way they're talking about the group activities, it's going to be the same way with the ship, at least the larger ships.
Yeah. The reason why I actually thought the same thing was I actually just got done playing a relatively newer game that had a ship with all these positions, and that was Pillars of Eternity 2, where they have each of the positions, and it was boatswain, helmsman, navigator, cannoneer, surgeon, cook, and deckhand. And the better that you got, each position obviously can only be filled by one person at one time, and they would get better at it over time. And the better that you got at it would affect different aspects of your ship. So if you have a better navigator, for example, then you move faster, turn sharper. If you have a better cannoneer, obviously you're more accurate. If you have better helmsman or deckhands, it increases other aspects of your boat, basically. And so that's the image that I had in my head when he started talking about the different skills and abilities for it.
Sure, makes sense. And I know Jeffrey came in here later and said the idea that you can spec into, create your own class of what you like to do on the boat, or how you get better at doing boaty things. Boaty things is a technical term. Yeah. It's going to be similar in structure to the artisanship trees. You have your mariner class. You have different trees in that class, whether it's gunnery, piloting, navigation, repairing the boat, that kind of thing. The more you go out on the sea, the more experience you get for it, the more you can spec into that class. Now, I seem to remember this question being brought up before. I know he used the word gunnery, but this might have just been kind of off the hip kind of thing. I'm almost positive he said there wasn't going to be any cannons in Ashes. I know it's more of an aesthetic type thing than anything, but I believe very early on he said that gunpowder had not yet been created, because I know Arc Age had guns on the ships, at least cannons. So I don't think that is going to be quite a thing. But I mean, with that being said, I guess they could just have giant harpoons. And I have that image from How to Train Your Dragon 2 with the ballistae on the ship.
Yeah.
You're going to have, if they don't have gunpowder, then that's what they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
If they're discussing, like they are earlier, the large scale, battles at sea where you're losing part of a fleet, you're not just going to be using, swords to do that. Something's going to take out the ship.
Could just be the old way the old Greek way was doing it, where you made a metal cone on it and rammed the ship. Yeah. I mean, the one ship from last month's pre-order package, I remember pointing it out that it was Greek in inspiration because it had that little that downward slope. That was the ramming horn, where they would coat that in metal and ram other ships. Now I know. Go ahead.
Then you don't want the swan boat.
Just to add on to it, I'm actually looking at one of Jeffrey's quotes from it specifically. And he says, the idea that you can spec into, create your own class of what you would like to do on the boat and how you would like to get better at doing boaty things, whether it's gunnery, piloting, navigation, repairing the boat, or that kind of thing. So that seems to imply that there is cannons.
And then I mentioned that at the start. Was that just a shot off the hip for no better word for what it was? I mean, how else do we end up with seamanship?
Right.
Instead of mariner.
I hadn't thought that one through.
Yeah, it was just hey, have we talked about seamanship yet? Well, is that kind of a personal question?
Probably.
I mean, even back in the day, they had multiple different ways of firing across the bow of other ships. You literally had Greek fire, which you could launch out like as a flamethrower.
Yeah.
You're talking Game of Thrones fire.
Not even.
Well, no, there really was Greek fire.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they're good.
That was definitely an inspiration for the wildfire in Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
but
Think
yes,
about the
Oh, yeah.
spells you can do, though. If you're doing
Yeah.
spells from a boat,
spells.
Yep.
I mean, you're gonna take out a lot.
And let's not discount ramming ships, because I will say the one thing that I did like about Arcade, for what little I got to play of it, was the boats. Like, it wasn't, you didn't hit S and your boat went, or not S, but D or whatever, and it went right. No, your boat sort of did a very big. It was hard to navigate some of those boats, because when you went to turn, your boat didn't just instantly go, okay. No, it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I can
boats are
fully
not a quick
imagine, and the way they described about having different components to your ship, what if you did outfit your ship to ram? And that was a way you could damage a ship. You put a metal spike on the front of your hull. And given the way the boats are, if you were able to flank another ship and crash into the side of it, you could damage the ship and cause it to sink or despawn or whatever. Because that is, they did mention different components. So I'm curious about how customizable your ship really can be. Any thoughts on that part? Okay, Sinbad, go.
Oh yeah. All right. So, I mean, first of all, we already know there's multiple different types of, ship designs, multiple different sizes. So there's going to be at least pros and cons to having a larger ship versus a smaller ship versus a faster ship versus a slower ship. How much armor you put on things. There's got to be that designed into there, just from how they're talking about different classes of ships being in the game. So that component of, like you said, being able to ram, that could definitely be like a mid-sized to a smaller ship, being able to kind of maneuver that quickly versus a larger ship, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the idea of armor. Like, being able to deck out. Yeah, you should probably be able to armor your ship, but that should severely slow it down.
Oh, yeah.
So that it's not maneuvering. So if you're willing to play the quote-unquote glass cannon of ships, you should be able to zip all around like crazy, but if you take a shot, you're going under the water. That's kind of a neat little counterplay. Do I want to risk being a heavily armored ship where if you ram me, the chances of doing much damage are minimal, but my maneuverability is just shot, but I don't really care. I'm a tank, essentially. What I do is I roll up, and my ballistae on the front, or my mages, or whatever I'm doing, my archers, they could do their work, and you could just beat on my ship all day, and you'll just slowly whittle my health down. So you have to choose, am I going to continue to try to rip the ship apart, or am I going to hightail it out of here knowing this guy can't catch me?
Oh my God, there's something I want to add to this, but I'm trying to find the exact name. I'll get back to you guys in a second.
Okay, all right. So we'll stall long enough for Alpha Soul to come out of the gate way smarter than the rest of us, like he did last episode with telling us that it was not an armadillo.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that is what Alpha Soul's role is, to play the intellectual, where he just is like, you are wrong, gentlemen. It is not this. It is the proper term. And we appreciate for him, because there's no way in creation I would have known what in the world that animal really was. But I definitely think, like you said, the idea of the larger the ship, right? And I'm seeing the ship as almost this, like hook points, if you will. I know hook points are old, but from a ship perspective, it almost would have different slots to it that you could fill with different things. Larger ships, you can decide, do I want armor? Do I not? The armor will slow it down, take up ships. I can put weapons up there, depending on how many weapons I want. If you're on the biggest of ships, you can have tons of people on there.
Another part of it would be how many, like maybe you could sacrifice like an extra weapon station for an extra repair person, Like that could be something you could possibly do. You could spec into roles too, versus having just additional components to the ship. But it'd have to be give and take in order for it to work.
Oh, yeah, no, you definitely want it to be that you could eventually max out every ship. It would definitely be, I'm putting more armor on my ship. Well, for every slot that you put that armor plate on, that's one less place that you can put make it look like this, like the portholes. That's where my ballistae fire out of. Well, we're putting a metal plate there, so you're one shy ballistae because we decided we want another metal plate there to increase our overall armor effectiveness. So now you lost one weapon. So, you know, that would be kind of neat. I'm also curious about the idea of, given that Ashes is more magical in nature, having defensive totems in place. Like, I'm going to replace this spot over here that would be for a ballistae that will now generate a magical shield to protect us against magical spells instead. You know, if you really wanted to roll that route, like you could have this arcane, you know, pillar or whatever to protect you.
That would be really interesting.
Do you want a larger cargo hold so you can carry stuff? I'm sure that will also be part of it as well.
You know, that kind of that actually kind of made me think of something real quickly. So, you know, you can have like a fleet, right? You can actually have multiple ships if you have a guild and all that. I wonder if there's going to be a collision physics in there where you could have a shielded ship in front of like your large main gunner ship. You know, the larger one could literally shoot over the smaller shielded one, but the shielded one could basically protect its hull. You know, something like that dynamic. I wonder if that would be possible in this situation.
Well, we know collision exists. The shielding I could see happen. From a technical side, and I'm sure Stormzlord would see this as well, the idea of line of sight is really just the computer detects if there's something in front of you. So I think it would be neat, but I'd be curious how they would do the coding to allow you to shoot over when... And this could be my layman's side of not really realizing it, but from what I understand in most coding perspectives, it doesn't understand the 3D space in that level. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you're not right, but that's okay.
No, I'm fine.
When you do that, you're telling it basically whether or not you want to be aware of the thing in front of you or not, right? So you can have the ability to ignore what's in front of you, and then the graphic may look like it goes up and over and right, but it really, the damage itself goes straight there because it doesn't know there's a whatever in the way. It depends how you set it up. You want to time it and all that so it works correctly, but you could do that line of sight or not, right? If you like, for instance, the sewer bosses in ESO, when they're walking through and you see the circle that you can't touch, that circle doesn't go up, right? You can hide above them. The circle can go under you, and they've decided not to look at height or ignore the height. They could say, and they ignore, if there's a wall there, they won't see through the wall because they've said don't see through the wall. They could easily say, because if you notice, if you grab aggro from one of the other ones, not at the boss, but even the boss too, they can shoot you through the walls. Because to them, the wall really isn't there. They've been told you can shoot through the wall, but you can't run through the wall. It depends how you set it up.
You could have just said I was wrong, but all right.
You could. You could, but that
had to really rub it in there.
That's not as fun.
No, I agree. That I'm fully aware that I have no idea what I'm talking about in some situations. Did you find what you were looking for, Alpha Soul?
I didn't find it, so I'm going to give you guys a preview. So one of the things that I really like doing is reading about EVE Online, just because even though I don't play it,
sure,
I find the stories just fascinating of the things that happen in EVE Online. And I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was reading about the story about a particular, it was like a larger guild, and it was a guy in the guild who would always outfit, it was typically a big slow ship in a completely different way than everyone else did, and he got made fun of it, and it ended up being that his ship build allowed them to win like these 3 major conflicts because it came out of left field. It was just basically like a big slow ship modded to be fast, so it maintained the durability of its original archetype, but it had the navigation capability to somewhat keep up with other ships. So
Okay.
I really wish I could find the name, but it just reminded me of what the potential possibilities would be of something like that if they allowed you to customize that
To that level, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like typically like an armor set, right? If you could do an armor set or whatever on a ship,
Yeah.
you can do your own build, and then you're going to look at speed versus density versus whatever versus whatever, and you're going to pick what you want, and you may have the weirdest build, but what if it is the best build for what you need?
Right.
Exactly.
I'm looking forward to that. I think that would be a great thing to add to it.
That would be neat, especially if people, because it's not quote unquote meta. We've seen that happen a few times throughout the game where these non-meta builds tend to wreck everything because people aren't used to seeing them the way that they're built.
Yeah, and that was it. Yeah.
Seeing a ship that you're like, oh, that's an armored carrier that clearly is going to be an arm, and then all of a sudden they built it for speed and ramming when instead it should have been a heavy gunner.
Yeah.
And also you're like, all right, we got time, and all of a sudden this thing's already next to you, just like ramming in the side of you because it was built for speed and like ramming rather than what its intended purpose was or what the meta intended purpose was of being a heavy gunning ship.
Oh yeah.
That would be kind of
That
neat.
customization, to me, that makes or breaks a game. Is the ability to completely customize it what you want to do, and you're not forced down a path or another.
I want to be one of those
I
Greek
agree with
fire ships.
Hey, I got the skin for it, man. You can jump on my ship.
There you go. Good. Someone did. I'm hopping on that bad boy.
Oh yeah.
Now all I need is some Greek fire, and we're golden. That's what I'm saying. Well, we're lit because of
Just
fire.
think
Get it?
about the spells you could do off a boat.
Okay.
I mean, just beyond the normal attack, right? You just have to make a boat sink. What do you have to do, right? Well, what if you have the ability to put something really heavy on the boat? Will it sink the boat? There's a lot you can do, right? It's amazing capabilities that you can think through what spells can do what to a boat.
I'm curious if they're going to take different damage into opinion, especially with targeted skills like fire spells. Yeah, most ships are made of wood. But what if you were able to target the sails specifically and then hamper their speed? Like, you took their sails away. Well, guess what? They're dead in the water now.
They're not going
because their
very
sails
far.
are burned up. So
here's a. Oh, go ahead.
No, that was just my thought of, like I said, that would be amazing to see. The practical side of me goes, they're probably just going to calculate damage to a ship, you know. Would I love to see the ability to target specific points and just, hey, you rammed the rudder and now they can't steer? I doubt that's going to happen because of all the other things they have to program in the game, but it would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to consider as well with like the totem defense, for example, that you're talking about, mages can teleport people. You know, they have the room that they can literally teleport people in and out of, and it has a set distance. If you get close enough as a mage, you could teleport your attack crew right onto the bow of their ship, and you can teleport other people off of their ship into the ocean.
Just teleport them like 5 feet to the left. They all just drop off, right?
Yep.
Mages are integral part of any boarding party because forget the
There's
gangplanks.
a lot to it.
Mages.
There's a lot to it. If you think of the abilities that they're going to think of to put these into it, but the outstanding possibilities that come into all this.
All I'm thinking of is a mage goes and opens this room to port. He's like, okay, we're there. And he was just slightly off, or the ship moved out of the way. People run to get in, and also they just like port, and then like the ship is like 3 feet. It's like, splash right into the water. The cartoon thing where they're running on air and then they go, oh no, and splash into the water. Yeah, that's my thought. I like it.
That's really fun, man.
I'm excited. Boats are definitely one of the things I'm most excited about. And one of the things that I love the most, I shouldn't say love most, because I really didn't give Arcage the time of day because it was a Korean piece of crap. But the concept that I loved of Arcage, the idea of going out on the boat and having the Kraken, do you know what that reminded me of when I was playing Final Fantasy 11? Remember taking the boat rides? And every once in a while, like, because the boat rides between the continents and stuff took like real life 30, 45 minutes. So for like 30 to 45 minutes, you could fish, you could kind of chat with people. But every once in a while, the shit would get boarded by NPC enemies and try to eat you. I think that was so neat with Arcade with the Kraken, the raid boss that you could attack with boats. From a PvE perspective, I would love to see a raiding game where it's, oh no, crap, there's Cthulhu. It's all over now. Everyone brought your raid pots, right? Because this is going to be hard. Yeah. No, I think that'd be pretty neat to see. All right.
Just like a weather dynamic would be awesome in that sense.
You know, they are doing, well, I shouldn't say weather, but we already know and previous when we talk about day-night cycles and seasons. The seasons being changed by a maintenance kind of puts the whole damper on all of a sudden a winter storm picking up. Because obviously a winter storm probably wouldn't start until winter, which there would be a server maintenance to kick winter into effect.
But it may wait till later. Right?
Maybe.
Winter starts, right? But say you're planning an attack, you got to go through a particular, snowy pass, and you look at looks good. By the time you get there, blizzard conditions flow through.
As much as I would love to say that's probably going to be the case, I really do feel like weather is just going to be flavor. I would love to say not, but I'm trying to be somewhat practical.
I wonder if we can
what
throw
they've
a
done
couple
with Battlegrounds is an ESO, right? Is like I said before, and it happened to me again today. I was in the Orc Battleground, and blizzard conditions were not there when you started.
Mm-hmm.
But then for maybe a 2.5 minute period, it was you couldn't see, right? You could barely see the nameplates of the enemies. And that's how much blizzard set in.
And that was really just a visual indicator. I really don't think we're going to see something like a hurricane that will sink a ship. I think there might be weather effects that look like it, but I don't think we're going to see anything that's like, oh no, there's a tidal wave and it's like the perfect storm with,
if you're going to have epic monsters in the sea, why wouldn't you have wave effects on the ships?
I just don't think they're going to code that in.
They might not.
I really don't think so.
They got 100 people. They got to get moving.
I mean, my character George Clooney and his little sloop is really not going to be sitting there going,
like George Clooney hitting the car with his scooter. He's not going to make it through that one.
I don't think he's going to.
We'll find out.
I know.
You're probably right.
I think, you know what? I'll do it. I'm kidding.
There you go. Higher storms.
Maybe it's a DLC in the future,
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Maybe.
It's only C++. Yeah, you're good.
No, if that's maybe. I would love to see weather effect more than just a visual, but I don't know of any game that has had weather effect that was not a survival game, and really it didn't really affect in the way that we're talking about.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
It is, but for a game that's already has a list of all these other innovative things,
I would love to see it come eventually, and
I think it will eventually. But will weather be the next innovation when Ashes of Creation is out? And everyone's like, "Oh, great, it's another Ashes of Creation clone." So why can't anyone be innovative? Everyone has node systems now. Well, guess what we have? We have weather.
We have weather.
I just think it's a little.
Could be.
Little too hopeful for all the other things, which I think are more what the game's about. Like this node system. This node system will make or break this game. That is what they're selling as their flagship system.
You're right.
And if it turns out just to be Guild Wars 2 dynamic events where people can time it and everything like that, if I start seeing websites where it's like, okay, this node is now siegeable, I think they will have failed in that regard, because then they really didn't do anything innovative. They took what Guild Wars 2 did, which was nothing more than timed events that happened every single... You could time it with a clock, like literally when they started, When they first came out, it was amazing because you're like, oh, how do we trigger this event? We must have to do something. Until it came out where it's like, yeah, you really... Like, I remember during the beta of Guild Wars 2, fighting in the God's Lost Swamp, trying to go, how do we get the Shadow Behemoth to spawn? There must be something. Maybe we have to kill enough of these dark portals. So we were out there killing dark portals. And then all of a sudden it spawned. Oh, that must be it. No. And it was just the fact that the timer came up. You know, or someone clicked the one button that was over there that kicked off the event. That's what it was. When the mystery was there at first, it was exciting because no one really knew, but the mystery kind of disappeared after about 2 weeks when someone sat down and went, anyone notice that the Shadow Behemoth spawns every 3 hours? Because I do.
Yeah.
And that is the flagship for this, is whether or not their node system is actually going to be what it is. If it doesn't, then Ashes of Creation is just I'm not going to say WoW clone, I'm going to say Arcage clone, because we've already seen from the art direction that it's pretty much a copy of Arcage. Almost exactly, because anyone see that scepter? That scepter that almost has a direct comparison in Arcage? I know I posted it. No? Okay. Am I being snarky? Maybe.
No.
I mean, a lot of people liked Arcage. The problem with it was that
Steven loved Arcage. That's why I'm seeing
Yeah.
all of it. I'm sure. He was like, I love that. But I'm just saying, from an outside perspective, we saw that or that scepter comparison. And then someone showed me, they're like, hey, this looks an awful lot like the same scepter from Arcage. And they posted it. I'm like, huh, it really does. Okay then, you know, I kind of got that that sense. You guys ever see like the fake the Chinese World of Warcraft where it's not World of Warcraft but the art looks identical to World of there was a mobile game that was supposedly a mobile MMO that when I looked at some of the art, I'm like, that looks like just a downgraded Thunder Fury. You know, like they copied it almost pixel for pixel and they changed the color a little bit so they couldn't get in trouble. You know, it's like that's kind of what I felt about it. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Off top. We were talking about seas. I would love weather, but they have to finish a lot of other stuff because even the boat system, while we love the boat system, it's really not that new. I mean, Ultima Online had boats. Their boats were obviously very simplistic. Arcage did boats amazingly well. It had multiple classes of boats. From what I understand, BDO did too, but I don't remember because I never got that far in BDO. Really didn't get that far in Arcage either, but I saw a lot of videos because I like boats. So, you know, that was a thing. I don't think they're going to do... The skill system is innovative. Possibly armoring, and I don't know. Someone who played Arcage could tell me if you could augment your ships in that way. But if you really break it down in terms of what they're actually doing, they are making your ship a character and giving it slots to equip armor on, or weapons. I mean, from a coding perspective, they're like, it's a character with armor slots. That's what it is. Yeah. I know I just took the magic away. We peeked behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the coder behind the curtain. But that's what it is. Yeah. Still, I'm excited for boats. I want my houseboat. I want my houseboat. All right. Any final thoughts on boats before we wrap up this show? Anything of note? Sinbad, did you have anything you wanted to say in particular? Since I know this is really a topic that's probably near and dear to a pirate's heart.
Well, being a pirate, I'm going to be out there hijacking your ship. So
there you go.
I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, they did say that's possible, but you have to destroy the ship to actually loot it. So I'm excited for the battles that come, stealing someone's ship out from underneath them and then destroying it in front of their face.
Oh, I was kind of going the other way with... I have a real love of Vikings, so I'm going to be on a ship, and all the coastal towns are going to get raided.
Oh yeah.
All of a sudden, you're
That'd
going
be
to see
fun.
a ship coming up, pulling up to the shore. We jump out, we kill everyone in sight, hop back on our ship, and go right back where we were.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's seriously one of the things I'm most excited about. I cannot wait to raid coastal nodes. That was definitely one of the top things I want to do is raid coastal nodes and settlements. All right, guys, that's the end of our show. It was pretty fun. I had fun, even with the
Yeah,
audio
absolutely.
issues. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and go around and tell people where they can find you. Let us start with our guest, Sinbad himself.
All right. Well, so I'm the guild leader of Ember. You can find us on our Discord. I'm also in the AOC community on a regular basis. You can also find me there. Just say hello. I'll be happy to talk to you.
I am not in the AOC community. I muted it, so unless you directly mark me, you're not going to see me. I've just had to say that. No. Anyway, Alpha Soul, how about you?
Yeah, I can be found within the Dungeon Crawler Network on the Hands of Fate channel. I'm known by Alpha Soul there, and I can also be found on YouTube /Dracdoc, DRACDOC, where I have a channel.
Excellent. And Stormzlord.
You can find me in the ESO. You can find me in the Dungeon Crawler Network Discord. You can also find me working feverishly on our Zoo Pop game from Digital Piper Studios for the Macintosh version, or the iOS version. So that
Excellent.
will hopefully be out this week.
Awesome. And you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_DCN, and of course in the community Discord for the Dungeon Crawler Network, which is in the description below. We do encourage you to join and just chat with us because we love to hear people from the community. If you are looking to join us, of course, you can check out our guild, Hands of Fate, the Ashes of Creation chapter of the Dungeon Crawler Network, a gaming community forged by the listeners of our gaming podcast. We've created an amazing gaming community and family. Come be a part of that. Hands of Fate is a PVX guild based off the North American data center because we don't have servers yet, but that's where it'll be. But we have players from all over the world. We have scheduled events for each region's prime time. So if you're EU or Oceanic resident but have enjoyed playing with us in the past, or perhaps maybe this will be your first time, we encourage you to join. Guild's focus is on progression ratings, small-scale PvE, craft and gathering, node-based PvP, aka the open world, and of course, community growth. So check that out. Of course, you can follow everything we do over at DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. We have shows for The Elder Scrolls Online, Tales of Tamriel. We have a general MMO gaming show called The Dungeon Crawlers. There hasn't been an episode of that in a while, but we do have one coming up soon. We have a collaborative show called Tavern Talk with Saga of Lucimi, another independent MMO. And of course, this show in particular. All right. All of that can be found over on that website, including our links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You can be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network if you want to help support the show, or you could also leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. And before we sign off, I must say that we are now also included on Player FM, if that is how you like to consume your podcasting media. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes, and we'll see you next time. See you later.